welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fact that life-changing decisions should be submitted to God in prayer. Let's go. Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, October 28th. I am super excited to be with you to share this lesson this week. I hope that you have your TSSG notes downloaded. If you've missed them, the link is down below. You've got your commentaries, your books, your Bibles, your pens, whatever it is that you bring to the study party. I hope that you're ready to get into the zone because we really do have a great lesson this week. But before we get into it, allow me to say to those who are new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. You are now a part of a family, a community of people more than 13,000 strong who, just like you, are excited about this word and preparing for our classes to be better teachers, better students. We're able to participate, but most of all, when we leave, it's not just about the Greek, Latin, and Hebrew or any memory verse, but we understand how to be better, how to be different when we activate God's word in our everyday lives. Do me a favor and make sure that you take a moment and subscribe to this channel. Look for the big red button that says subscribe, or if you're on your desktop, you may see a picture of that Sunday School Girl in the box, but click on either of those and get subscribed, and then make sure that you take the extra step of clicking the notifications bell so that when we upload content on this channel, you are in the know immediately and you can stay connected. Just a few things before we get into the lesson. First, I want to say that the Pink Hope shirts have been delivered. I have gotten the most amazing messages from those recipients, and I'm looking forward to pictures. I hope to share some of those with you. But what I really want to share this week is, as you know, we've had a Fall into Sunday School fun initiative each week. And this week, I am excited that our Fall into Sunday School initiative is going to celebrate breast cancer fighters or survivors who are Sunday school teachers, Here's where I need your help. If you know a teacher who is a survivor or who is currently fighting breast cancer, I need you to just leave a comment down below. Leave an encouraging message to them. Give me the name and the church where they teach. And at the end of this week on Sunday, 5 p.m., that's the cutoff for the drawing, we're going to choose one teacher to celebrate and to send a $25 gift card for dinner for that teacher, just to show love and support. As you know, all month long, we've been celebrating with survivors and fighting with fighters. So again, in the message, in the comments below, whether that's comments on YouTube, I will also check for comments on Facebook, but leave a message, encourage a teacher who is either fighting the fight or celebrate a teacher who has won her battle with breast cancer, his or her battle with breast cancer, and we're going to choose a teacher on Sunday to share some love with for Fall into Sunday School. Make sure that you leave me those messages. Looking forward to it. The next thing I want to say is I appreciate you all so much. You are so much a part of this success. So many of you share very tangibly with this ministry, and I appreciate you. It was my commitment to open up more opportunities for sharing, and on third Sundays, I have started to ask your help with our Sunday school class offering, if you will, and I've called it $3 Third Sunday. Except last week, I was so excited about the lesson. Just so excited about the lesson that I forgot to give you that opportunity. So I apologize for that and want you to know that this Sunday, we're going to do that. So if you are willing to share your class offering with that Sunday School Girl, with your class this week, there's a link down below. It's just $3, and it helps us to continue to do the work that we are doing here for you and to build this community. I want you to know that that Sunday School Girl is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization, so your donations are able to be claimed on your taxes if you should choose to do that. So again, the link is down below. The last thing I want you to know is that I am on my way to the Windy City. I am so excited this weekend to be the guest of Superintendent Michael Payton and the Illinois First Jurisdiction Sunday School Department. There's actually a regional conference going on, and it is going to be amazing. It is a power-packed Sunday school conference. The title of the conference is so amazingly provocative. It is the autopsy of a dead Sunday school. So if you are looking for amazing training and you are anywhere in that region and you can make your way to Chicago, Illinois, you should do that this weekend. Here's the flyer for this event. I'll also post it on my page. And if you check that sundayschoolgirl.com under events, you'll find this flyer and other flyers for trainings and engagements that I have between now and the end of the year. I would love to see you if I am in your area. That's it. Again, we have a super lesson for this week and I'm ready to get into it. So let's go. Our lesson title is Isaac and Rebekah Continue Their Legacy. The Bible basis is Genesis chapter 24, verses 12 through 21 and 61 through 67. The Bible truth. Rebekah took initiative in answering the call to become the wife of Isaac and thus to play a vital role in the unfolding of God's promises. Our memory verse is verse 61, and the lesson aim is that we will understand how Rebekah seized the opportunity to become part of God's plan. Joyfully welcome the possibilities God opens up to us and say yes to the opportunities God provides for us. Fall is my absolute favorite time of the year. I think a lot of people know that. I love everything about it. I love the changing of the season. I love the changes in nature. It was so amazing to be home last week in Kansas City and to see the trees, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. I kind of missed that here in Texas. It was wonderful. I love fall holidays. I love fall clothes and layering up. And I am always looking for a reason to wear my boots. So I love this time of year, but this season also is a time that represents transition very naturally because it's been a time of year where I've lost loved ones and I think about friends who have lost people who were very close to them. In fact, I have several friends who've lost parents in the fall season, and it doesn't make me really sad, but in this time I think about the things that were left to us by some of those people. And this particular week marks 16 years in particular since my grandmother Henson went to be with the Lord. And I think about my grandmother. I think about others in that generation. I think about friends who have lost parents. And again, it's not with great sadness, but I've really been pondering this idea lately that we thought so much of them and their ministries, and we depended on them and the prayers that they prayed. And as they move off of the scene, it really has occurred to me in a weighty way that now falls to us. There is this thing called legacy. It is what you leave behind when you're gone. And someone is expected to pick that mantle up and continue it on. And if we think about it, in our families, many of us have a legacy, a heritage, something that was started, left to us, and we are expected in some way or have the opportunity in some way to continue that legacy on. You hear me share often about my family on my father's side, but actually I am the blessing of legacy on both sides. First of all, a legacy of loving and serving God on both sides. And also on my mother's side, a legacy of hardworking, industrious, entrepreneurial people, amazing people who love God and love family. My father's family is marked by a legacy of ministry leadership. My great-grandfather was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My father was a preaching deacon. And my brother is now a pastor who actually has the honor of following my grandfather's leadership in the local church. And it wasn't just the men. My great-grandmother was a missionary. My grandmother was a missionary. And so many of the grandchildren and now the great-grandchildren. And we're even seeing the love of God and ministry service in our great-great-grandchildren. And it really makes me think about the fact that it's not just the name that you carry, but it's what you do with the legacy that comes with that name that becomes so very, very important. And I thought about that in the scope of our lesson this week, looking at Isaac and Rebekah, who are continuing this amazing legacy. We've been studying for a few weeks now about Abraham, a man who has been made great promises by God. And what we've seen in his life is faith. But we've also seen that God keeps his promises to Abraham. There are promises that Abraham walks in that really go back to where we started in the beginning of this quarter, looking at the garden. And when God spoke to Eve, there was going to be seed that would come from her that would ultimately be the victor that would crush the head of the enemy. And there's been a promise made to Abraham that through him, all the families of the earth would be blessed. In last week's lesson, Abraham and his wife Sarah had a son. It was the promised son. His name is Isaac, and Isaac's name means laughter. Now, Isaac was born after God made a big promise to Abraham that didn't seem likely or believable because at the time, Abraham was old, Sarah was barren. But 25 years after the promise, God did just what he said. If you missed those lessons, you should go back and check them out. In chapter 23, and a lot has happened since last week's lesson, in chapter 23, Sarah, who is a woman of faith, dies. And this week we're in chapter 24. And it is a long chapter. There's 67 verses in it. But let me try to give you a summary and we'll talk through our printed text. Basically, there's a problem now. Think about the fact that we've got a promise on the table. The promise to Abraham is that through him, all of the families of the world, the people of the world would be blessed through his offspring, through his seed. And here is Abraham with the promised son who's now 40 years old and he has no wife. So how could this promise be fulfilled except that Isaac gets a wife? So Abraham's solution was to find a wife for his son Isaac. But what type of woman would she be? What type of woman would be able to walk in these shoes to fulfill such a great promise of God and to be a part of this great legacy? Verse 1 tells us that Abraham was old and he was well up in age, but that God had blessed him in all things. God keeps his promise. We saw that promise 2 weeks ago in chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. God has kept his promise to Abraham and he has blessed him in all things. And in this chapter, Abraham gives his servant an assignment. Again, his goal is to find a wife for his son Isaac. And he's got a servant who's a faithful servant. And if you look at this, Abraham really is a trusting master or a trusting manager was what I said. And he required first that his servant made a promise to him. He initiated the making of, the Bible calls it an oath, which was an ancient Eastern tradition or custom of putting the hand under the thigh and swearing to God. But he wanted a promise from this servant. The promise that Abraham wanted from the servant had everything to do with the type of wife that he knew Isaac would need. She could not be just any woman from anywhere. Abraham knew the will of God for his family because he had been made a promise by God. My aha here was that we know the will of God for our lives when we learn God's promises, and we do that through his word and through relationship with him. So Abraham was very clear that Isaac's wife could not come from Canaan. She couldn't be one of the girls around the area that they were in now. Why? Because they were not alike as it related to their faith. They did not serve the Lord in the ways that Abraham and his family did. They did not know their ways. The Bible talks about being equally yoked. And so it was important from a spiritual perspective that they were equally yoked. That's great dating advice there. As we are in our single states, when we are meeting people and thinking about the seriousness of relationships, it is so important to make sure that we are aligned from the basis of our faith. And so he wanted this servant to go back to the land that they were from, back to Haran, where he knew there would be someone who would have like faith. And for the covenant blessing to continue would require a godly wife to pass down a legacy of faith. The women in Canaan did not have that legacy of faith. They did not serve the true and living God, so they could not pass down that same legacy of faith. And Abraham knew that his son could not marry an unbelieving spouse. That, again, this is a whole dating series. You cannot marry an unbelieving spouse and successfully walk out a faith journey together. Isaac, however, was not to go back to Haran. That was another requirement, that the servant would go, but Isaac could not go. As a matter of fact, the servant had some real questions. He was about to make a 400-mile trip. It was going to take several months to get there, and a whole lot could have happened on the journey. They could have gotten beat up on the journey, robbed on the journey. A lot could have happened, and so he had questions. He's going to an area that he doesn't know very well to look for someone he doesn't even know who she is. And so he's got some questions. And by custom, he also knew that he may get all the way there. identified the woman, and maybe she didn't want to come, or maybe her family would not allow her to come with him. And so what would have been customary is to come back and to bring the groom so that he might make the request for the wife. And that's where Abraham says, absolutely not. The promised son was not going to be allowed to leave the promised land. If indeed the servant got there and the family said no, Abraham says, don't worry about it. You will have fulfilled everything that you are required to do. But Abraham's faith was so confident. He was so assured that he says, God is going to go before you. And as a matter of fact, he's going to send an angel before you. Abraham believed, and he knew that God would go before, and Abraham expected that God would show the servant the answer. He was confident. We see this again. He's unwavering, and he is convinced. But again, if the answer was no, the servant would have no further assignment. Isaac was not to leave. There were no contingency plans from a human perspective. And we've seen Abraham do that before with Sarah when things weren't quite, when the pieces weren't in place. That's when Hagar came into play. But this time, we don't see any human effort on Abraham's part. He says that God will give you what you need. And Abraham knew that God made good on his promises. And so he speaks with confidence that God is going to provide what is needed. We see a level of trust. That brings us up to our printed text, which is actually in verse 12. We knew that we needed all of that background because verse 12 starts with the word and, which means it's a continuation of the story. So now that we have the story, we see that this servant does set forth on his journey. And we learn, I think, in verse 10 that the servant takes 10 camels with him and he goes off to Mesopotamia. He got going. He got moving. Even though he didn't have all the pieces, he too steps out on faith. Even if it was the faith of his master, he steps out and he goes to do what needs to be done. And even though, again, he doesn't really know what's supposed to happen, he doesn't know the plan, he doesn't know how it's going to play out, here's what the servant does. The servant, when he doesn't have all the answers, he prays. And that's an aha for us. When we don't have all the answers, when we're uncertain, what we can do is pray. And the servant's prayer, I noted here, is very, very specific. The servant has seen the faith and the trust of his master in God. And based on that faithfulness and based on that trust that he's seen, he has this confidence now in asking God for himself. He's basically saying to God, I have this assignment from my master. And now, God, I need you to be my guide. I need you to make me successful today. The Message Bible says it this way. Let things go smoothly. Show me what I'm supposed to see. In verse 13, we see that the servant goes to the well. Why the well in the city? Well, because that's where the women are. We see that that's where the daughters of the men go to draw water. And typically they go in the morning or the evening, which are the cooler times of the day. And he knows that there are going to be lots of women that come to the well that day. But how would he know that she was the exact one? Well, the servant basically lays out a two-part test in his prayer. The first thing is that she would offer him something to drink. He wasn't going to know her by her beauty or by external factors, but by efforts that she made. So the first is that she would offer him a drink, and she wouldn't stop there. She would also offer his camels something to drink. Now let's go back and note again that there are 10 camels. So first of all, this woman, we're going to see that she has a spirit of hospitality. But she's also going to be one who's got the heart to extend herself to others. But more than that, she goes the extra mile. She is willing to go beyond herself, to go the extra mile. 10 camels can drink anywhere from 20 to 30 gallons of water in one sitting. And so 10 camels, that's a lot of water that she is manually drawing and bringing for these camels. And that's how he will know the one. Verse 15 says that it happened while he was still talking to God, while he was still speaking, while he was still praying, that behold, Rebekah comes out. And we get her lineage. We find out whose daughter she is. And she has a picture on her shoulder. And we learn from this lineage, we're given this information because if you still have your family trees from a couple of weeks ago, and those are on my page if you need to download them, you'll figure out that she's Abraham's great niece. And this damsel is, he didn't ask for anything physical, but verse 16 tells us that she is beautiful. She's pretty. She's a pretty girl, but she's also a virgin. That means she hasn't been all over the community. There's been no man who has been with her in a sexual way. And he runs to meet her and he says, I pray thee, give me a drink of water from thy pitcher. And she says, drink, my lord. And she offers him the drink. And I noted that she was in a hurry. I highlighted the number of times the lesson said that she hastened to do what he asked her to do. She made haste. She moved very quickly. She ran as she served. In verse 19, Rebekah meets the second part of the two-part test. The servant does not ask for anything, but Rebekah offers water for his 10 camels, and she's going to draw it. Again, the servant is looking, watching, observing, while Rebekah is serving. And she's serving willingly and with a good heart and without hesitation. And so as the servant observes, he's wondering, he's trying to decide, has God made me successful today? Is she the one? This is not in our printed text, but when she's done, he offers a thank you gift to her. He gives her a nose ring and 2 gold bracelets. And then the servant asks some questions. He asks first if her father has a home or room that he can stay in for that night. And she says, I am from Nahor's family. We're distant relatives of Abraham. And when he hears that, the servant knows that she's the one. I thought it was very interesting that lots of women would have been at the well that day, but God allowed the very first woman that the servant would talk to be the one that he was intended to find. And if you read the servant's response to recognizing that she was the one, he didn't ask questions. He didn't second guess anything, but he worships God. He asked to be led by God. God honors his prayers. And so he now worships because God has come through for him. He worships God for being faithful, recognizing that his prayers have been answered and that he has been made successful. Again, not in our printed text, but kind of bridging us to the end of the story. The servant gives Rebekah these gifts. She shows them to her family. In verse 29, the brother he's on big brother mode. And he sees that gifts have been given to his sister. And he wants to know who this person is who's given the gift. So he invites the servant in. They do give him a place for him and his camels. They offer him a meal. There's a dinner hosted in his honor. And here the servant tells this entire story of how he got here, why he's here, who sent him, and he gives a personal testimony of how he prayed a very specific prayer and God had orchestrated this entire moment. The testimony of the servant resonated in a way with Rebekah's father and brothers such that they said, this is from the Lord, and they released her or gave her to the servant to become the wife of his master's son. Now, they slept on this, and the next morning they weren't so sure, but they asked Rebekah what she thought, and her response was simple, I will go. Another translation in verse 58 says, I'm ready to go. In our printed text, verses 61 through 67, we see that she does go. She rises, and she and her damsels go with the servant. They ride on the camels, and when they get back to Canaan, or they get to Canaan, Isaac is out meditating. He is out thinking on the things of God and remembering what God has done and reflecting on God's goodness. And it is the evening time. And I noted this, the very first time Rebekah sees the man that she is to marry, she sees him spending time with God. The text indicates that Rebekah and Isaac were both looking down, and at some point they look up and they see each other. And I found this interesting. We see Rebekah get in a hurry again, because when she sees Isaac, she gets down off of the camel and she asks the servant, who is that man? And the servant indicates that it is his master. And the servant then talks with Isaac and tells Isaac the whole story. And his testimony is that God did it. And this is the woman who said yes to the plan of God. In many ways, she had some of the characteristics of his own father, Abraham. She left her family. She left her community. She left what was familiar to go on a faith journey. This was a woman of faith. And Isaac takes her home to the tent of his mother. He takes her to meet his family and he marries her. But the Bible tells us that he loved her. He didn't just love the one he married, but he married the one that he loved. And Isaac had a companion after the death of his mother. And here the legacy continues. And this is our lesson. Here are my key learnings from this week. The first is that God answers when we pray. When we get in places that we don't have all the pieces, we don't know what to do, we may not understand, we don't have to create a plan on our own. We can and we should pray because God will give us answers. And when God answers, the answers are not for God's benefit, but they are given to us to build the confidence and the assurance that we have in Him to know that He is faithful. Secondly, in big decisions, we want to consult God. In our lives, we want the will of God. We want things to go God's way. So especially in our life-changing decisions, we should submit those to God. And here we're looking at a marriage decision. Should I get married? Who will I marry? These are life-changing decisions that are looked at in this lesson, and some that we all have to walk out at some point in our lives. Who are the people that are to be in our lives? How are we to connect with them? And we should submit those to God when they are life-changing decisions. Next, our faith has to be alive. Again, even when you don't have all of the answers, you can step out on confidence that God will give you direction. We are all agents of free will, but that does not hamper the plan of God. And I thought about that in the context of the servant being concerned about going, and the woman may not want to come back. Her family may not want to release her. If you look at that, Rebekah chose to go. Verse 58, she says, I will go, or I am ready to go. So we are agents of free will, but that does not hinder the plan of God from being accomplished. Next, God can reveal people to us by their actions. Again, when the servant stood by the well, it wasn't a physical beauty that he was looking for, but he learned a lot about that woman by the way that she served. And just the same, people learn so much about us by observing us, the ways that we come and go, the ways that we deal with situations. They learn a lot about us by how we serve. There's a man at my church several years ago. I remember he had like a flat tire one day at work, and he changed the tire. It was kind of one of those mornings where everything could go wrong, did go wrong. But when he had the flat tire, he changed the flat tire and came into work with such a joyous attitude that one of the young men at work said, this happened, and this happened, and yet you're still smiling. You're still happy. You're still having a good day. And that was his opportunity to begin to talk about the joy of the Lord being so present in his life that things like that didn't even have the ability to throw him off. People learn a lot about the God we serve by our actions, by the ways that we respond, by the ways that we serve. There are also things that we can learn about people in observing, and I listed this as a dating note, about being equally yoked. We saw in the lesson that it was important that Abraham was so conscious that she needed to be a woman of faith, a woman from a like background, a woman who would understand the God that he served, the true and living God, and would understand the importance of faith and the importance of serving God in that legacy assignment. So it is important as we go through dating relationships that we are not connected to others who do not have like faith. Next, we should give God immediate praise when our prayers are answered. Our faith does not stop with us, but it is our responsibility to pass faith on to the next generation. I started by telling you that I think about those people who have gone on before us, people who walked out and lived legacies of serving in ministry, people who had amazing prayer mantles, people who had amazing ministries of caring for others. And I believe that many of us are at the stage in our lives where we can no longer continue to just rehearse what those people did and celebrate the amazing lives that they had. But we've got to sit in a place of recognition that tells us we're those people now. And we now are required to live a legacy that others, to leave a legacy that others will be able to grab a hold of and continue to serve the God that we serve in the way that we serve, and know that God keeps his promises and that God is faithful. And we prosper as we continue to walk out God's word. We prosper as we continue to lean on him and to know that he is faithful. that promised. Again, this is the lesson this week. Whatever you got in your lesson, whatever notes you made, you know I love hearing from you. So if there's something I need to add, please leave it down below. I will add it to my notes so that I can be a participant on Sunday as well. Have a wonderful rest of the week. I will see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.